There's an old series on YouTube called Sequelitis, made by Aaron Hansen of Game Grumps fame, writing under the name of Ego Raptor. Some of these videos have garnered tens of millions of views at the time of my recording this. If you're an aspiring game developer, it's well worth your time to watch and learn from all of these, not just for their entertainment value, and they're certainly hilarious in their own right, but for what they have to teach us about game design, both what to do and what not to do. If there's one central thesis that runs through all of them, however, it's that good design is often marked by respect for the player's agency and a reliance on the game itself to teach you through level design, rather than relying on some overt tutorial or exposition. One game that takes this idea to heart and runs with it is the recent Metroidvania darling Rune Fencer Illyia. Those who backed the game on Kickstarter got a chance to play the demo early, and from my own playthroughs on this channel, there is a lot to love about this title, from its charm to its beauty, to its heartfelt character development, from its clever puzzles to its epic boss fights. All in all, I can say with confidence that it will go down in history as a game to be studied and replicated for years to come. And in this video, as well as others in the series, I'll show you exactly why. Before I start, I should issue a spoiler warning, as the game is still in early access at the time of my recording this. So, if you don't want me to ruin the story or certain puzzle elements, feel free to come back after you've played it for yourself. But for everyone else, I'm Marussia Dark of Circuit Studios, and this is how Rune Fencer Illyia teaches through level design. A bit of context for those who might be unfamiliar with the game. In Rune Fencer Illyia, we play as Illyia, a runist whose primary skill is fencing. See, the game already does what it says on the tin. Thanks for coming to my GDC talk. Like, share, subscribe. Okay, jokes aside, you play as 15-year-old Illyia of Moonstone, a spellcaster on your way to the Runist Academy in Centralia, along with your prodigy twin sister Lily, who, despite your profound lack of confidence and self-worth, tries to help teach you the mystic arts. She's an Emerald, the highest ranked sorcerer, while you're a Moonstone, the lowest rank. Runic users tend to take on their power stones as surnames. Emeralds are great and rare magical healers, whereas your primary ability is swordsmanship, conjuring mystical spells and arcane weapons called runes, hence Rune Fencer Illyia. During your training, the airship you're traveling on is attacked by a mechanized sentinel, flinging you, your sister, and presumably everyone else aboard into parts unknown. You wake up alone on a mysterious island refuge in the Kingdom of Ethos, and begin searching for your sister. All you find, however, is her bracelet, which now seems to grant you Lily's emerald healing powers, presumably because of your deep love and connection to your sister. The rest of the game is you on a quest to find her. Aw, so precious. Now that the backstory is out of the way, let's look at 4 examples of how Rune Fencer Illyia teaches gameplay mechanics through level design. Much like in Aaron's video on Mega Man X, the lessons start right from the title screen. We don't know it yet, but this strange Virgin Mary statue is actually quite critical to both the lore and the gameplay. Its presence along with the main theme is quite memorable. As we discover later, this is the Blue Lady, a goddess within the world of Centralia, who's responsible for gifting runists like ourselves with magical powers, as well as blessing us with her divine grace in the form of critical save points and rest stops where we can load up on food and equipment. From the very first seconds of the game, we are subconsciously told to remember this image because it's that important. Upon starting a new file, we begin the game with Illyia falling, in what will soon become a common motif. We're given the option to choose our first power, and one to sacrifice, which in turn will affect the difficulty and playstyle of the rest of the game. Not unlike choosing your starter in Pokemon, where your rival always chooses the one that best counters you. Each power is relatively intuitive to understand just from its icon. Relying on visual representations over expositions makes for good game design, as it sort of acts like a mini puzzle in its own right, on top of also avoiding the issue of localization. You don't need to be told what effect this will have on you. You just know from the language of cultural archetypes. Although, the helpful flavor text is a nice touch, being slightly intriguing and cryptic, while still confirming your suspicions if there was any doubt, unlike some of the more heavy-handed explanations in some other games. So the first thing Rune Fencer Illyia does to teach you is, it treats you with respect as an intelligent person, capable of figuring stuff out on your own. It follows the show-don't-tell principle, letting you piece together things for yourself through your own knowledge and experience, an approach it takes throughout the game in all its levels and puzzles. The game gives you visual clues, but doesn't explicitly tell you what they mean, at least not right away, foreshadowing things to come, leading to an aha moment when later you put two and two together in your own mind and feel like a smart person for figuring it out. For instance, as we make our way through Hero's Grave, we come across this impassable door with a strange symbol on it. It's not a stereotypical keyhole or bombable wall like we're used to in other games. Yet obviously it's a lock of some kind for which we don't have the corresponding key. There's no other way for us to go except down, so down we go for now. A few other times we encounter this symbol again, being led to it by a shiny object or in passing by this purple crystal that emits the symbol when we strike it. We climb up this platforming section, only to reach an area that's too high for us to access. With no other way to progress, we eventually start smacking walls, until we discover that one is indeed breakable. Aha! And we didn't have to be told that we could break walls. We figured it out on our own, because of the constraints and limitations put on the player through level design that funneled us here. This secret passage leads down to a boss fight. Defeating the boss, we get the energy strike rune, and see this strange symbol again. If we hadn't already put two and two together, that this is the technique we need, the game reinforces that immediately with another stone door as our only way out. Thus, we're forced to use the energy strike to free ourselves. It's literally the only thing we can do, and the time between acquiring it and using it is minimized, so it's still fresh in our minds. We strike the door, and wait for the arrow to align in the direction of our shot. Though, really, the door is only able to go in one direction, which is to the right. In the same sequence, we also come to learn through the presence of this skeleton that our new power can be used to kill enemies by crushing them with physics objects. Indeed, that's the only purpose of this scaly boy, to teach you this lesson. After a bit of platforming, we encounter an identical wall, except this time, its lateral movement is locked in place by these two notches, meaning it can only move up and down. This is meant to teach us that we can align our shot for vertical strikes as well, not just horizontal ones, while also conveying the timing required to pass through doors without the added pressure of enemies breathing down our necks. Crossing over this bridge, we're presented with a puzzle in the form of a ball with this same symbol on it, inviting us to strike it into a wall, creating a path back. Now we're free to use the energy strike on echo crystals, doors, and anywhere else that symbol occurs. And if we happen to forget this ability after a while, no worries. The same symbol now handily appears nice and big in our UI as a constant reminder. It isn't until much later in Frozen Spire when we discover the time stop rift that this ever changes, by which point we've already grown accustomed to using the Energy Strike rune. Put a pin in that, as we'll come back to it later. This same ball puzzle also teaches us that we can stand on objects without taking damage from hazards, a skill that will prove useful elsewhere in other tricky platforming sections. Indeed, we're forced to acquire this knowledge whether we want to or not, as it's the only way to escape the room. And at no point did an annoying companion ever have to tell us that. We figured it out on our own. But, hold on. What if we mess up on the ball puzzle and miss our shot? Are we just stuck here? Well, no. If we get frustrated and try to leave, passing this X marker will reset the puzzle, giving us ample chance to try again until we figure out how to time our shots. In fact, all the puzzles like this are fairly forgiving, preventing you from becoming soft-locked. And even if we ignore that and just die to the spikes, we're put back in the boss room instead of a shrine, making it impossible to avoid learning this critical skill that we use over and over and over again with progressive difficulty. Once we've mastered the Energy Strike, we can experiment and learn other uses for it. For instance, we're later taught explicitly that this power allows us to steal runic spells and weapons from enemies. However, if we tried striking an enemy before that on our own, just to see what happens, we could discover that power sooner. It's not locked behind the tutorial, just behind the ability. If we played the game before, or are otherwise curious, we can avail ourselves of the opportunity to use it to collect runes from bug and plant enemies prior to facing the revenants, allowing us to experiment in this playground and uncover hidden secrets we might have missed the first time around, like the third wind ability. I know I sure did. Oh, and I should probably mention that memory stones in this game act like charms in Hollow Knight, equipping them to our bracelet provided we have enough attunement slots, so getting one is a huge prize. Later still, we're forced into a dead end where we have to use the Energy Strike to break down a wall and find our rival, Ceci, who teaches us alchemy. Again, we're never told we can use the Energy Strike in this way. We're just funneled into reaching that conclusion on our own, as there's no other possible path forward along the critical path, all thanks to the structure and layout of the level.
So, Mr. Piccolo, what are you going to teach me today? A brand new technique? How to sense energy? What about how to fly?
Dodge!
This leads us to the second way that Rune Fencer Illyia teaches through level design, and that's with its use of one-way passages and points of no return. Make no mistake, this is a hard game. A couple people have even described it as having Dark Souls level difficulty, both in terms of the puzzles and the combat. But that doesn't mean it's insurmountable. Indeed, Rune Fencer Illyia's levels are structured in such a way that encourage, if not outright force you, to hyper-focus on developing and mastering micro-skills in a relatively low-risk environment well before the game ramps up the difficulty. Forward progress is often blocked until you do, as are some secrets. A perfect example of this technique in action is how the game teaches you the dodge roll. We first learn the dodge ability in the tutorial level aboard the airship while practicing against this animated combat dummy. But unless you're a pro gamer, it's unlikely you'll have mastered this move your first time out. I know it took me an embarrassing number of tries to get it, even on my second playthrough. No worries, as the tutorial section is a safe place. Even during the scripted fight against the boss, it's not required. You can beat him without it, since, even though your health bar is hidden, Lily will always heal you of any damage, making it impossible to die. Apart from the tutorial on riposting, it's not actually required that you dodge. You can survive the early part of Hero's Grave just by running and jumping. Same for the enemies you encounter along the way. You can dodge and riposte if you're able to, but it's not strictly required. The enemies here aren't particularly difficult, In fact, their movement is fairly predictable. You can experiment on your own in a relatively low-stakes testing ground. There's plenty of places to practice the dodge roll, both with and without enemies if you feel confident. The first time the game actually forces you to dodge is this trap right here, a one-way path leading to an Indiana Jones-style boulder trap. The gap is too narrow to walk through, so you have to roll, but you have all the time in the world to get ready. Once on the other side, however, you're stuck and cannot go back. Metroid Dread has similar areas that you could slide through, but need the morph ball to get back the other way. So far as I know, there's no such ability in Rune Fencer Illyia. Maybe in the full release, we'll see. Anyways, dropping down from this narrow ledge forces you to activate a pressure plate, which causes a boulder to start rolling towards you. You might be able to escape if you're fast enough to outrun it, but it seems unlikely. At least, I wasn't able to do it after several tries, and certainly not on my first attempt. If you fail to dodge, you get hit, and are forced to restart the puzzle from the other side of the narrow gap, so you can't just cheese it by tanking damage and using iframes to move on. You can jump over. There's certainly enough room at the start, but it'll land you back on the same switch again thanks to this enclosed space, sending down another boulder, causing you to repeat the cycle again and again and again. You literally can't proceed unless and until you master the dodge skill with perfect timing, which is a good thing, because you'll need it later during boss fights, unless you want to have a bad time. So the game is not only physically preparing you how to dodge, but is mentally preparing you for the fact that there will be times in which you can't afford not to dodge. Some attacks are simply unavoidable otherwise. Before we even enter the puzzle, the shape of this passage is too small for Illy to walk through, and there's no crawl mechanic like there is in some other games. The only way in is to roll, and the only way out is to roll, which, given that you just did a successful dodge roll to get into this area in the first place, it's fresh on your mind as something to try. The narrow corridor also serves as a visual anchor for other locations you'll need to roll into later. For instance, shortly after getting the Scythe rune, you climb up this cavern and pop out next to a chest. Striking the chest spills a bunch of money out all over the floor, and some of it lands inside the chest. Naturally, you're inclined to want to collect all of it in covetous fashion, so you hop in, only to discover a hidden slide leading down a secret tunnel. There are a few items to collect here, followed by some tricky platforming over water, wherein, if you fall, that's okay, no harm is done. You can try again. The only way out is to learn how to time your jumps, and use another dodge roll to exit back to the chest. A black veil hides the passage from one side, so you'd never even know it was there. Having to learn this jumping section is the cost of finding secrets. But again, that's a good thing, since later versions of the same layout require this ability. Only now, it's over spikes with crumbling or timed platforms, or even pools of toxic green liquid that will kill you instantly. In classic Metroidvania fashion, Rune Fencer Illyia has many hidden areas like this one. Secret tunnels within chests, secret walls, secret floors, and even secret ceilings. This brings us to the third way in which the game teaches you through level design, and that's situational awareness. Alright, so the secret tunnel with the chest was relatively easy to find. The fountain of money practically ensures you'll fall into it. But this area actually holds not one, not two, but three separate secrets. The first and most obvious one is the chest with a map of Hero's Grave. That's the one the game practically gives away. However, if you're observant, you might have deduced based on your trip back through the one-way passage that maybe there are other hidden areas behind walls, and decide to start checking for breakable sections like the one near the overgrown guardian, or things covered by a veil of darkness. In fact, if you cross the water and jump up, Illyia will grab a ledge, revealing that there's a secret room within the secret room, with another chest inside. This one contains just a bunch of money, but like before, some of it falls in the chest, compelling you to jump inside. If you do, you'll notice the ground beneath you starts to shake, thus revealing a secret within a secret within a secret. Call it chestception. To break this, you'll have to return later with the downward strike ability using the gravity rune, which unfortunately doesn't appear within the demo. Basically, if you've seen Hollow Knight, it's pretty much exactly like the Desolate Dive ability. I only know about it from official artwork on Nootbox's site, but even without that meta-knowledge, you can still put 2 and 2 together and realize this is another lock and key puzzle for later, just like the doors that require Energy Strike. And because the area was likely so memorable the first time, both for its beauty and its novelty, it'll definitely stand out as an important landmark to revisit. As far as I'm aware, this is the earliest possible one of these you can find in the game. A few others appear scattered throughout the world, along with chests positioned in high places that can only be reached with the double jump ability, gotten from the space rune, which, again, isn't in the demo, so here's some promo footage to show you what it looks like. These areas serve to tease the player with rewards that are just out of reach, but serve as encouragement to press on. The early game still has plenty of secrets for you to find, however, if you're observant and willing to experiment. For instance, in one of my playthroughs, I was just messing around and happened to time a jump perfectly to do this sort of glyph-powered high jump, what I'll henceforth call a triple jump. The glowing magic trail looked really cool and piqued my curiosity, such that I had to know how to do it again. Eventually, after much trial and error, I figured out you could do it with predictable regularity. A move, by the way, that the game never explicitly tells you that you can do, but which is always available from the word go. I happened to discover it in an area that encourages lots of successive jumps, so the odds of landing one by accident were relatively high. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing on the critical path that absolutely requires this ability, but plenty of secrets can still be gotten with it. For example, in the well below Central Shrine, there are shiny treasures to the left and right of where you free Ronaldin. If you never discovered the triple jump, you might conclude these areas are off limits until you come back with the space rune ability, but turns out the triple jump will reach them just fine. Similarly, after repairing this lock beyond the dry fountain using the energy strike, you could easily miss a faint glow of light shining down through the ceiling. A strange occurrence in hindsight, given the perpetual rain outside. Something I overlooked on my first playthrough, but came back to after wondering whether it was possible to triple jump on top of the stone switch, purely out of curiosity. Turns out you can, and my inquisitive persistence was rewarded with an incredibly rare Mender shard, which is needed to extend your attunement to equip more memory stones. Again, those are like charms for you Hollow Knight players. Armed with this newfound knowledge and ability, the completionist in me desired to hunt down any and all secrets this game had to offer. Above the area where you rescue Arlen the blacksmith is this broken staircase. I reasoned that, if I could make a triple jump in the well, I ought to be able to make this one too. Alas, it's just out of reach, but I eventually found a way, seemingly by accident, but which the game fully intends for you to be able to learn. See, back when you first get the Scythe rune, there's some text on the floor that tells you how weapon-type runes come with a dodge roll ability. Most of these are actually super cool, and really fun to use. But my first playthrough, I glossed over this entirely. However, because the game had forced me to learn the dodge ability, I eventually learned how to riposte and use runes in combat. A simple slip of the finger at the right time, and I wound up hitting the B button while dodging, which fired off a volley of arrows diagonally. The dodge roll ability for the bow. Much like with the triple jump, the glowing particles were cool enough and surprising enough to pique my curiosity and try it again. I then started experimenting with other runic abilities, until eventually finding the text in a second playthrough to confirm what I had discovered on my own. Ultimately, I was able to use the whip's ability to do a trick jump off the elevator onto the platform above the stairs, and my efforts were rewarded with another Mender shard. Nice. Unfortunately, the area beyond it was definitely something that would require the space rune in the full release, but it was comforting to see how forgiving the game could be at times, and how much it encouraged exploration and experimentation. I was just being a clueless idiot who missed what was right in front of me the whole time. That's not the game's fault, and now hopefully you won't make the same mistake. I don't really have a better segue for this, so I'm just going to stick it in here. Remember I brought up the time stop rune before? Well, this is another area where the game teaches you mechanics through situational awareness. Because time stop isn't in the demo, we don't get a tutorial card for it like we did with the energy strike, just a handful of clues that we have to assemble ourselves. However, we still have all the information we need to make use of it to solve this one puzzle in Frozen Spire. We start off entering from above, completely out of the line of fire. Before we see the danger, we see the results of the danger in the form of this corpse that's been impaled by a giant arrow. We then see an echo crystal, which we're immediately drawn towards as a rare collectible, having encountered others like it before. Striking it gives a bit of lore explaining that the white ball behind us is a time rift. Since all the other crystals we've seen up to this point occur next to a corpse, we can reasonably assume the echo belongs to the man lying dead beside us, and that he met with some terrible fate related to timey-wimey shenanigans. By this point, we've been conditioned to the mechanic that, if there's no interact prompt, we should try hitting things to make them work. So we do, and are met with strange noises and post-processing effects. The rift is placed between the entrance and this switch on the floor that activates a trap. We can't see the trap yet, but we know something is up. And this positioning gives us a chance to figure things out and take notice of our environment before it hurts us. So at least when it inevitably does, it feels fair, like it was our fault for not getting it sooner. And even if we do take damage, it's not an instant death. The game is merciful to us, unlike our fallen Athosian explorer. In many ways, this puzzle reminds me of the buzzsaw from Half-Life 2, wherein we get the gravity gun and are shown a corpse cut in half by a saw blade, leading us to include that we can use this as a weapon. In RFI, we're never explicitly told that we have the power to stop the arrow, but we're given context clues and a warning. We can hear the shot being fired, and there's a ledge above us we can retreat to until we figure out the perfect timing, and conclude that hitting the rift stops the arrow mid-flight. Recalling our earlier lesson from the first energy strike puzzle, we know that certain physics objects can be stood on, and we see a platform on the other side of some spikes. Putting it all together, and with proper timing, we eventually learn that we can make this jump if we freeze the arrow at just the right moment. Some more dangerous platforming, and we're ultimately rewarded with a Royal Medallion shard, another rare treasure, and a pretty great prize all around. Best of all, beyond getting a gold medal for our efforts, is the satisfaction that we were able to figure it out on our own, without help from anyone. The last point I want to look at in this video is related to environmental awareness, and is what I'm calling diegetic learning. The term diegetic refers to something within a work of fiction that actually happens in-world to the characters, as opposed to something that's non-diegetic or meta, which is an abstraction meant for the viewer's benefit, but which would seem unrealistic or out of place if it happened within the fictional universe in question. So, for instance, when Avengers Infinity War plays Rubber Band Man during the introduction of the Guardians of the Galaxy, that's diegetic, because Peter Quill and his crew are actually listening to that song as they fly around through space, as opposed to something like the Avengers theme song, which is purely non-diegetic for our benefit as the audience, to help evoke a certain mood. Diegetics hide mechanics, while non-diegetics reveal them, While there is certainly plenty of meta instruction in Rune Fencer Illyia, press the B button comes to mind, the game also makes a valiant effort to try and incorporate as much as it can diegetically into the game itself to avoid breaking immersion. For instance, on the airship we come across this sign posted by the management that tells us not to slide downstairs, which, of course, the very first thing we're going to do is slide down those stairs, and man, I have to say, it's so frickin' satisfying just about every time. Besides just being hella fun, it's actually a useful movement skill that preserves momentum, allowing Illyia to jump further than she otherwise could. This mini tutorial, quote-unquote, is diegetic in the sense that there's really a sign posted inside the game world that Illyia can read. It doesn't break our suspension of disbelief. In fact, almost the entire airship, with a handful of exceptions around button presses, is pretty much completely diegetic, Illyhia's high jump abilities notwithstanding. If you try to talk to the pilot, you're immediately scolded because doing so might crash the airship, which makes sense. The wind on the upper deck will blow you back. You can even jump on the bed in your cabin. So much more room for activities. The combat tutorial is basically just Lily coaching her sister in preparation for Runic Academy, as she would in that actual situation. There's even a joke about how Lily used her Runist powers to bring the training dummy to life, giving a plausible in-world excuse for why it's now suddenly attacking us, in what might otherwise be a cliché video game trope. Even Lily's healing powers are consistent with her role, and why the fight is basically impossible to lose, because she'd do anything and everything as an adept spellcaster to protect her weaker sister. Obviously, there are parts throughout the game where info cards and text overlays are still used, arguably unavoidably so when explaining complicated mechanics. But, for the most part, just about everything that you learn is stuff that Illyia also learns. For instance, when we meet Pubmaster Russell, he will actually scold you for standing on the bar, something that a lot of other games would allow, simply because it's a mechanic and the devs couldn't be bothered to program out such uncivilized behavior. If you try to buy food from him, he'll get mad and tell you that you already have stuff on your person and you should try using it first, while also making it clear that, if push came to shove and you genuinely had nothing, he wouldn't just let you go hungry. This kind of self-awareness is a nice touch that really adds to the charm of the game. If you come across a bench, you can sit on it. Pass a friendly animal and you can pet it. You can ring bells and catch frogs. You can sit and listen to music or take in a gorgeous landscape. And it isn't just you doing it, but Illyia as well. Everywhere you go, the game feels like a real place that obeys logical rules, despite the pixelated art style, or the ability to survive fall damage. As a result, nearly all your actions feel natural and intuitive by design, because the game responds in a way that you'd expect it to. So those are just some of the ways in which Rune Fencer Illyia uses good level design to help teach you, the player, how to actually play the game in a way that respects your intelligence and agency without relying on heavy-handed tutorials or annoying companions. Most of these decisions you probably didn't even notice while playing the game, but you most definitely would have if they weren't present. There's a lot more I could say about this topic, and all the excellent design choices that went into this title. It's clear Nootbox poured a lot of love and attention into finally crafting every last detail of their game. I'll put a link in the description to their Steam page so you can wishlist it and play it for yourself, as well as links to my Patreon and Ko-fi. If you found this analysis valuable and wish to help support the channel, please consider donating. It really means a lot to me, and is what will enable me to continue making content like this in the future. There's also my full playthrough of the demo, and I'll be uploading episodes of the final release as well when it comes out. As I said, there's a lot more to say about this game. In the next episode, I'll be looking more specifically at enemy placement within the world of Rune Fencer Illyia, and the subtle but brilliant ways this also teaches you how to play the game without you ever realizing it. If you'd like to see that video and other gameplay breakdowns, check out the links appearing on your screen now. Until next time, I'm Mauricio Dark of Circuit Studios. Take care.